let's talk about creativity and walking. Why would walking improve creativity? What is the evidence that it does? And, what would you advise towards walking and creativity? Because I think this whole area is super interesting as well.
Yeah, so there's lots actually to say on this. So there's the kind of the amazing anecdotal evidence, and then there's the what we've got by way of really kind of good quantitative of evidence. So it's been clear since time immemorial that people walking generate more ideas, and people walking and talking together generate lots of ideas. And you go back to the ancient Greek philosophers. You had the peripatetic school of philosophy where people literally walked and talked, and we've known things anecdotally like walking meetings are a very good way of having or getting to solutions in a non-contentious way over contentious topics, because when you're walking side by side, what you're doing is focusing on the horizon. You're not doing something which is, in primate terms, quite aggressive, which is, staring into each other's eyes for
Hmm.
a prolonged period of time. And then, if you look at the biographies of the great philosophers, writers, and others, they all say somewhere, I love walking. That's where I get
Yeah.
my ideas. So Stephen King, the horror and other writer, is a famous walker, and he advises in various places to get out for a walk when you're stuck. Mathematicians famously go for walks, and I tell
Yeah.
the story in the book of mathematical discoveries that people have made when they are out for walks. Bertrand Russell, the famous Welsh philosopher, always went for a walk before writing in the morning.
Yeah. I believe Charles Darwin as
Darwin,
well. I did a
yeah,
I did a video on creativity, and Charles Darwin had his thinking path that he went on
yeah,
every day
absolutely,
for two
yeah.
hours, and yeah,
Yeah, so there's loads of data like that, or sorry, anecdotes like that.
yeah,
Um, but what we know now is that um, if you take standard tests of creativity, so an obvious one, or the simple one that's used in psychology, is you're handed a series of objects like a pair of glasses or sellotape or whatever it happens to be, and you have to come up with as many uses for those objects in 30 seconds as you can, or in some defined period. If you get people to walk beforehand, they typically generate about twice as many ideas as they would have done had they not been walking, had
it's
they been
crazy
seated.
effect size, right?
Yeah, no, it's
Twice as many
enormous.
as
And here's the kicker, and I just love this. That original study was by Opezzo back, I think, in 2013. A replication of that was conducted a couple of years ago by a Taiwanese group, where they contrasted people in their late teens, early 20s with people in their late 60s, early 70s. And what they found was that people in their late 60s, early 70s, when they were made to walk prior to idea generation, came up with twice as many ideas as the seated 18 to 22-year-old group, or whatever the age group was. So even as you get older, the very fact of movement will give a boost to creative thinking. Now, the question naturally is, why is that?
yeah.
So it's one thing to say, look, 10 minutes on a treadmill, 10 minutes walking up and down the street, 10 minutes walking around your house, or whatever it happens to be, will give a kick to your thinking. And I think there's probably two or three potential reasons that come together for me. One is a very simple physiological one. When you're walking, your body's being challenged in ways that it isn't when you're seated. So I'm seated in a chair. I don't have to do very much to stay upright. I've got a back on the chair. Whereas if I just sit up like this, suddenly my body has to work a lot more.
Hmm.
Maintaining a vertical is a hard thing. Making sure my head doesn't flop is a hard thing. Now add locomotion to that. So you've added multiple challenges. So ideas that might be floating below the level of consciousness in your brain suddenly now get a little kick. The enhanced level of activity in the brain is all around the brain is bringing them to consciousness. So that's possibly one. Possibly, I don't know that for sure.
Hmm.
It's hard to conduct studies like this.
Yeah.
But kind of the second thing that I think goes on is that you're giving yourself a chance for random associations to come together that wouldn't otherwise come together. The visual input that you've got is not constant anymore. It's changing. The auditory input you've got is changing. And the sensory motor input you've got is changing. The footpath is changing. The incline or decline of the path you're on. You might see somebody when you're walking that and you say hello to them. So you got a lot of other things going on. And you're giving yourself also the chance to take a break from what is a narrow channel of focus, which is your screen. Creativity, I think, can be killed by this excessive focus on the laptop. What you need to do is break out of that, give yourself a bit more freedom, and engaged in what I think could be called a kind of a focused unfocus around the problem that you're trying to solve. You have it in the back of your mind somewhere, but you're thinking about other things, and you come back to it occasionally, and then you may get the aha moment that you were otherwise lacking.
I couldn't agree with that more. I think I'm curious. The visual input one seems key to me, and just changing up the visual input. Do you think, or have they ever done the study on if you still get the same Torrance test creativity results if somebody is just treadmill walking, staring at a white wall?
That's been done too. And movement is the key thing.
Okay.
It's not necessarily so. In the Petzo and Schwartz study that I mentioned, they get people to treadmill, and getting up and moving really probably is the most important thing. But then you've got all the other stuff going on as well.
Interesting. Okay.
So I think they all leverage off each other, because you can test your idea easily. Don't move, but look out the window at the green scene that you might have, or give people VR headsets so that you're not going to get the same augmentation. But get up and move. That will make the big difference, because our brains are built and our bodies are built for movement.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That's interesting to me that they did test the treadmill, because they're good scientists, and like it was still the same, or I don't know if it was the exact same effect size, but it was still very effective. So
it was in the same direction, and was roughly of the same magnitude. And I think actually, if I recall the study correctly, what they got people to do is just corridor walk. Before
not massively interesting.
So,
they're not walking through the rainforest.
Yeah.
Interesting, because again, that kind of goes against intuition, where I'm thinking if I'm walking through a rainforest and I'm just seeing all these different colored birds and animals, that's what would drive all of these interesting ideas and bring all these things together and connect modalities together, because it's so different to what you're used to. But the fact that this works simply by walking on a treadmill, on a wall, in your gym, no matter what, or at least you'll get an effect size in the same direction, is very interesting. Like, it is exercise dependent.
Yeah, movement is really important.
Very good. Okay. So how do you think the default mode network connects in with that? I talk about the default mode network a lot in my videos, because I've done stuff on meditation, I've done stuff on creativity, and that's a brain network that's kind of crucial to those processes of divergent thinking, convergent thinking. Why do you think walking at a particular pace seems to make that network more active?
Yeah, so there's a lot of it's difficult to do causal studies here, because we can't brain image people easily when they're walking. So what we can do is measure electrical activity, or measure what's known as near infrared spectroscopy activity, and they don't give you a good readout of the default mode network. So it's hard to do causal studies here, but what my guess is the following: that when you're seated, as I am at the moment, there's not a lot going on in the brain or body. The vestibular system, as I mentioned, is not being challenged. I don't need to work hard to maintain an upright. There's all of those kinds of things. But when you're out and walking, and you're walking at a nice, reasonable pace, the central pattern generators in the spinal cord are maintaining your movement for you, so you don't actually have to think about the nature of every step that you're taking. This is assuming that you don't have problems like I do with your knee or whatever. So you've got this kind of automaticity in the behavior, and you only really need to think about the initiating event, the decision to get up and move, and the terminating event, finished the walk. So what you're doing is engaging in a kind of a mindless, and I don't mean mindless in the sense of mind blanking, but a mind freeing activity where you're able to allow your thoughts to wander, and at the same time your body is moving. So I think it naturally entrains the default mode network. And if you look physiologically, we know this from studies in animals, that what's called theta rhythm is paced at around about a human equivalent of probably 3 to 4 kilometers an hour. So theta is the kind of natural physiological rhythm that the hippocampal formation, which we've not talked about, but is really central to memory and imagination, is activated. And what we know is our senses are more alert. There's a lot more things going on. Our visual acuity goes up. Our auditory acuity goes up when we're moving compared to when we're not moving. So there's a lot of different inputs going on here. And, one of the key points about the default mode network is this idea that you can engage in kind of mental time travel. You can think forwards in time, where you're going to be next week. Think backwards in time, what were you doing last week? You can focus on big picture stuff in a way that being seated at a computer doesn't allow you to do, because you're intrinsically task focused. And the literature on the default mode network and creativity is really interesting. Roger Beatty has shown that the best creative outputs in knowledge workers happen when they're able to engage the task positive network and the default mode network simultaneously. So you're not switching between the two, you're having both turned on. And this is a hard thing to do. So what you're doing is looking at the forest, the big picture, and you're looking at the trees at the same time. And
Right.
being able to maintain those two psychological states simultaneously seems to be the best state in which creative ideas flow.
So what might
And
that look like in terms of someone having like a basic problem that they're trying to solve, or they're at their desk and they're trying to solve something? What might be the equivalent of zooming out and zooming in be for a particular problem where you're doing both at the same time?
Well, my advice is, if you're at your desk and you can't solve it, get up and
Yeah.
walk away from your desk. But in essence, what you're trying to do if you're at your desk is move your kind of psychological focus from the detail of the problem to the big picture. What is it that you're trying to get to? Are you trying to solve a theorem? Have you got some inchoate idea about what the end state is likely to be? And if you're getting trapped in the detail, you can't think about the end state. So what you have to try and do is maintain what the end state idea is likely to be, and focus on the task in such a way that you're able to pick out the paths that will get you to whatever that end state might be. So you might be trying to solve a maze, for example, or you're in a shoot 'em up game, or whatever. These are all examples of knowledge work, because you have a problem to solve. In the shoot 'em up game, you have to kill the other guy without being killed. You have to get to the end of the game. You know what the target is. And in some of the modern games, the paths to the end are not defined. It's up to you to look at the big picture in the video view that you might be given of the overall game, and you have to focus in on the detail of what you're doing.
Yeah.
So it's trying to maintain those two things in mind at the same time, and that's actually a very hard thing to do.
It's a very difficult thing to do.
But we can do it. That's the point. We can be trained to do it.
Yes.
I really hope you enjoyed that clip with cognitive neuroscientist Dr. Shane O'Mara. If you did, I couldn't recommend more our full conversation. It was really wide ranging. We talked about walking, creativity, the use of devices, if our attention spans are shrinking, TikTok, loads. It was a really interesting conversation. I couldn't recommend it more. And as always, subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much. I'll see you next time.